first of all, great to have you here on this really important subject. And ladies and gentlemen, just to give you a little bit of background, Tshering did his secondary schooling in Kalimpong here in India, but then had a very interesting process to his career development and his personal development. He went to, first of all, study engineering in Pittsburgh in the United States, then went to Harvard, to the Kennedy School of Government, and then he started his career as a civil servant. He created the National Technical Training Authority in Bhutan, and in 2007 entered politics, particularly to serve the King of Bhutan, King Wangchuk, who had established democracy in Bhutan in 2008. In 2013, he was elected the Prime Minister. He'd in fact started Bhutan's first registered political party, the People's Democratic Party, and also, very important, so serving democracy in the great Indian tradition, but of course Bhutanese tradition is different, but as important. And interestingly enough, is the oldest of 6 siblings from a very distinguished family in Thimphu, the capital of Bhutan. And his mother had helped build the first road connecting Bhutan with India. How about that? So, just before we begin, I thought...
There you have it, my biography.
That's your biography. But the reason that we're here is I thought we would just start this by telling you which are the top 3 polluting countries in the world. Have any of you got an idea of who they might be? Okay, I'll tell you who they are. Number 1, China. 30% of the world's pollution comes from China. In just 5 provinces, more dioxide emitted than any other country in 5 provinces. Number 2 in the world is the United States of America. There have been some changes, better climate control, but still insufficient. And number 3 is India, correct. 14 of the world's 15 most contaminated cities are in India. 14 out of 15 cities are the most contaminated in the world. So, Tshering, this is something that you have been concentrating on so much, and particularly with regard to the Himalayas. And for India, it stretches from the Pir Panjal range in Kashmir to the eastern part of the Arunachal Pradesh, the junction of India, Burma, and China. But first of all, tell us about Bhutan and how you got Bhutan to be carbon neutral. What is carbon neutral, and how did you have that as a central feature of your prime ministerial term?
I didn't do anything.
Oh.
Bhutan has always been carbon neutral. I just had the good fortune of serving as a public servant in the government of Bhutan. What is carbon neutrality, you ask?
Right.
I think every country on earth was carbon neutral at some time. Basically, what it means is that country, to be carbon neutral, you sequester more carbon dioxide than you emit. Basically, that's it. And at a given time, I don't know, in our past, maybe 300 years ago, 500 years ago, I don't think anybody has asked this question, actually.
Right.
I think every country in the world must have been carbon neutral. Today, we have only 2 countries that are carbon neutral. That's Suriname and Bhutan. And both countries are very small. And
so what's the population of Bhutan?
Bhutan is 700,000 people only. And I mean, while being carbon neutral, and I call it carbon negative, it is very, very important. But the fact is, out of 200 odd countries, out of 195 countries, to have 2 countries carbon neutral is not okay in a world that's facing a climate crisis, as you put it.
So do you think it's correct to identify this as a climate crisis? It's not climate change. It is a full-blown global existential crisis.
Yes, it is. It is a crisis. It's an existential crisis for humanity, not for the planet.
Right.
The planet has existed for billions of years. It's going to exist for billions of years, short of a big asteroid blasting Earth. The planet is going to exist. It's humanity, whether we will exist or not, is a big question. And I think this is, with the climate crisis, I think this question needs to be answered. So today, the world emits something like 55 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year.
Wow.
We need to get that to zero. Otherwise, we are going to be in trouble. There are scientists already predicting that the world is warming up too quickly. We've already increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels. Our seas are already rising. The last 20 years, 19 of the world's hottest years on record have happened in the last 20 years. So these are all pointing towards what you call an existential threat. Now in Bhutan, why are we carbon neutral? Yeah, very quickly, there's geography, demography, spirituality, and leadership. Right. Geography, because we are located near the tropics, so it's perfect for growing forests.
What percentage of the country is covered by forests and sylvan?
70%.
70%.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And demography, we are only 700,000 people. So obviously the pressures on our forests are going to be less. Spirituality. Traditionally, we have revered the environment, our forests, our lakes, our rivers, our mountains, and that helps. But most importantly is leadership. And we've been blessed with leadership in the form of our kings. They are the ones who have legislated, they are the ones who have made sacrifices for the environment, in favor of the environment over mindless economic growth, for instance. They are the ones who have made far-reaching policies and laws. Today we have a law that requires by constitution that 60% of our land must be under forest cover. Today it's 70%. We have also made a promise to the world that we'll always remain carbon neutral for all time.
Incredible.
So this is the leadership that's required.
Right.
And earlier Ralph was trying to congratulate me for making Bhutan carbon neutral and asking me how I did it, and I did absolutely nothing. It was the leadership in the form of our enlightened kings.
Okay, so here's a question for you, because we want to really focus on the shrinking glaciers of the Himalayas. And if we look at that, there are 2 billion people downstream from the Himalayas. The Himalayas provide 40% of the world's fresh water. It's India's water towers, when you think about it.
And China's.
And China's, it's melting. And for those of you that are not aware, there's a river in Nepal called the Karnali, which is the biggest tributary feeding the Ganga. So if the water is shrinking in the Himalayas and the glaciers are not providing the water flow, the Ganga and all of its incredibly profound spiritual strength and importance to India, plus drinking water, agriculture, people's livelihoods. Tell us about the shrinking glaciers. What are you seeing?
Well, it's not just the Karnali and the Ganga. 10 of Asia's biggest rivers, the source is in the Himalayas. From the Indus in the west through Ganga and Brahmaputra and Mekong and Yellow and Yangtze River.
Wow.
All of them have their source in the Himalayas.
Right.
And in the Himalayas, that source is the glaciers. And now with rising global temperatures, with increasing threats of climate change, our glaciers are melting. So what that means is the source of these mighty rivers that provide drinking water and agricultural water to, you mentioned 2 billion, I think it's about 1.6 billion people living downstream in 8 different countries. Their livelihoods are going to be compromised.
So if you look at the North Pole and the South Pole, the biggest concentration of ice permafrost, you started a fantastic, or you were certainly instrumental in starting something, not the South Pole, not the North Pole, but you called it the third pole.
Not me. No.
But you developed the extension of that.
Yes.
Just tell us what the third pole is and why that came about.
Well, I spoke about the third pole, the concept of the third pole in that the Himalayan region being the third largest repository of ice, that was already established and it was already called third pole. I just spoke about it.
Right.
But I spoke about the third pole council and basically recognizing the fact that most of the countries that comprise of the Himalayas were not doing enough to safeguard the health of the glaciers. And indeed, no one country can protect even their own glaciers, forget about all the glaciers in the Himalayas. What's required is all the countries to work together in collaboration. So you have India and China, obviously, they are the biggest countries and they make up most of the Himalayas and the glaciers. Then there's Afghanistan and Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Bhutan. So these 8 countries are directly affected by the glaciers. But there are many other countries who may be indirectly affected by the glaciers. And they need to take part in the council. And then there may be international agencies that have a stake in the glaciers. And so I mooted the idea, I proposed the idea of having a third pole council consisting of these 8 countries and other stakeholders to monitor the health of the glaciers. Because we are not going to do anything about protecting the glaciers unless we know what's happening. And together we need to actually monitor the health of the glaciers and then come up with policies to protect the glaciers. And by extension, through that, protect the livelihoods of 1/4 of humanity.
So here's something that happened in Bhutan that I would love to hear your sense of. Bhutan's largest glacial lake is called Tortormi So. Is that the correct pronunciation?
So is lake, yes.
So tell us about how increasing temperatures have melted huge volumes of ice and snow, and it created massive problems because of this glacial lake, large glacial lake. What happened downstream from that glacial lake after this occurrence?
Well, Tortomi Lake, a lake near Tortomi burst, and that caused massive destruction downstream. And when a glacial lake bursts, it's called a glacial lake outburst flood.
Because of melting?
Because of glaciers melting. The lake cannot contain the additional water. It floods, charges downstream. Sometimes it cascades into another lake, which would release even more water. But regardless, as it goes down, our very narrow valleys, debris, it brings down debris, rocks and boulders and trees and everything down its path. This debris sort of forms another artificial dam. And when that breaks, it causes even more flooding downstream. So this happened several decades ago. But just last year, Tortomi Lake, we heard, had burst, and we were really scared. Turned out that 2 small lakes downstream of Tortomi had burst. So we were lucky that Tortomi didn't burst. And the reason Tortomi didn't burst is we spent almost a decade lowering the level of Tortomi Lake. If we leave it at its natural level and allow the glaciers to continue melting as it's doing now, then Tortomi Lake could burst at any moment, and that would be disastrous, not just for Bhutan, but downstream into India.
So this has obviously got great consequence to all of these countries that rely on the Himalayas. And really, in essence, it's something that is going to be the focus of what is called COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, at the end of the year. Tell us about COP26 and why that is so vitally important to India and yourselves.
Well, and to the world.
And the world.
Okay. COP25 didn't quite live up to its expectations.
What is COP?
The Conference of Parties of the UN FCCC. This is the UN agency that monitors the environment. So COP25 in Madrid didn't live up to its billing. And so now COP26 becomes all the more important. We need nations to come together and make better commitments to bring down the amount of emissions so that we can fight climate change meaningfully. But around COP26, there are some other events like TED. Chris Anderson and TED, they've launched something called Countdown to Zero. And in October, they will be having a summit and a special TED conference, I think, in Norway, where they want to bring in world leaders of all stripes and all manner to commit to not just spread ideas of bringing down emissions to zero, but actually implementing action to bring down carbon emissions to zero. In Bhutan, in October, we will be having a unique race billed as the most difficult ultramarathon in the world. 300 kilometers along our highest mountains. We have to run almost at about 5,500 meters also. And the whole idea of this marathon is to raise awareness of climate change. His Majesty the King has trekked this area many times and has personally seen the receding glaciers, and because of his concern for the glaciers, has really established this particular race.
So here's one final question. When you were Prime Minister, of course, the world knows about the king.
Is that the past or the future?
No, the future. Well,
You're talking of the future?
well, I'm talking about Bhutan, really. But as a final question, and the final question is this. The king had pronounced that one of the ideals of Bhutan is the gross national happiness. What is your interpretation of the gross national happiness? Because in government, when you were the Prime Minister, what did you believe that to be done for the benefit of the people of Bhutan?
I know what Raf is insinuating. When I got to serve as Prime Minister, during the first week, some international newspapers came to me and said, "You don't believe in gross national happiness." And I said, "You're wrong. I believe in gross national happiness. What I don't believe in is just going around the world talking about gross national happiness while not implementing its important principles at home." And now, no. And now I'm going around the world talking about gross national happiness. But anyway, how do you implement the principles of gross national happiness? What does it mean? It basically means, it doesn't mean making everyone happy in the moment, making you laugh, making you joyous. It doesn't mean that. It means improving the welfare and well-being of our people.
Exactly.
It means improving, or rather providing, the conditions to be happy in a sustained manner. It means allowing people to be content with life.
Delhi, listen to these wise words. This is what we need for India. Tshering Tobgay, unfortunately our time is up. Thank you so much for coming to see us and teaching us, don't worry, be happy. Don't worry.
I think we need to worry. I think we need to worry
We
with
do.
climate change.
Thank you
Well,
so much.